Welcome to Wilder Wolves Hall of Fame Mode fandom. My name is Wilder Adams, and today's episode, I am joined by Evan Porter of T Wolves Insider, one of the biggest Timberwolves Instagram platforms out there. Also, somebody with some connections with the team, and he's grinding right now in his own career while also maintaining his Timberwolves persistence. Evan, how are you doing?
Doing well, man. How about yourself?
Doing great, man. Timberwolves basketball, we just had probably the most fun, impressive loss of my lifetime the other
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
Yeah, and 55 points. They came back down 25, and that was a bizarre game. Let's just Before we get started in today's show, I am so thrilled to tell you guys about the first ever Wilder Wolves podcast sponsor, 612 Tees. 612 offers a wide range of uniquely designed Minnesota sports tees, and you can see these awesome Timberwolves options right here. Because I am chronically online, the one that resonates with me is the Wizard of Nas t-shirt, because I've spent a lot of time making memes, and I once made a Wizard of Nas meme, so it comes to life in this t-shirt, and I am definitely going to buy one. But there's not only Timberwolves tees here, because you can look up here. There's a ton of different sports. You can also get crew necks, accessories, etc. There's a lot of Nas Reed agenda right here, and we always promote a Nas Reed agenda on Wilder Wolves. And then you see this really sick Justin Jefferson crew neck. Use the code Wilder25 to get 25% off your first purchase. It's a great way to support a small business, and it also helps this show out quite a bit, so definitely check them out. So today's episode, everybody, we are just going to give a list because we're about halfway through the season now, 43 games in. Just each of us are going to give our three favorite and least favorite things about the team at the halfway point of the season. But before that, let's just talk about the two games over the weekend briefly. So the Rockets and Spurs, both losses, not terrible losses in my opinion in the given circumstance of the health and the comeback on Saturday. Evan, so what did you think about the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say like those losses are, any bit hurtful or obviously, the standings that we're in right now or, within a few games, I don't think it really is a huge deal as far as the losses, but I mean, I saw some competitive basketball. I mean, I only really got to catch the second half of the Rockets game, but obviously, you know, I think a team like that, when KD was like their only really offense that game, it looked like in the second half, and we went on kind of a run when he was out of the game and just couldn't finish out that game. Ultimately, I mainly really wanted to see like the Spurs game is the one I really caught that my eye. Just
Mm-hmm.
being down 20. You've got Nas Reed got hurt. You have Rudy Gobert out. You're playing your 19-year-old center some big minutes in Behringer, and you get down 20 early, and all things kind of just point at Spurs this game. Wolves kind of look just really out of dysfunction on both sides of the ball. And then, this third quarter starts and, things start to kind of slowly chip back in our favor. And then boom, you're right there back in the game. And I like this was kind of like the breakout performance of Anthony Edwards. I know he's had some great performances this year, but like this screams like, okay, officially like a superstar in the league kind of performance from him. I've never seen such impressive shot making from him before. And I was reading like the other day, it's just the numbers of him just year by year. And he's almost hitting that 30 point per game now this season. And I'm like, I think it's really time to talk about, him. How, is he in that top five for the MVP right now? And it seems like he is. Wolves fourth in the West right now. Like, and it's been an Anthony Edwards season. I mean, it's been him. It's been another level from him. So that was kind of the standout of me. And just obviously Behringer, like throwing into the fire. He had a really solid performance a few days ago, and saw that Finch quote from Finch about it's hard to take away people's minutes, but it's hard not to play a guy who can come in and like impact the game. And I just love the energy he brought. Like as a 19-year-old, like haven't really had much playing time yet, and he just really just came in and just the energy he plays with and like the confidence at such a young age. On the defense side of the ball, offense rebounding wise, like he's just an energetic guy, and I'm excited to see kind of his growth. Maybe the second half of the season as he continues to get some tick.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with a lot of these losses throughout the season, it's been early in the year, it's been a little bit of panic, and then I think the New Year's losses were awful, but these two losses, there was a lot of positive takeaway from it. I think we should jump into the Anthony Edwards conversation because Ant will dive more into the show based on the topics we have today, I'm sure. But that was one of the most impressive shot making highlight reels from one game I have ever seen in my life. Just period, point blank. The way he was able to fluidly just get to every single spot, every single level. He's legitimately entering Steph Curry talks as a shooter, which is freaking nuts. If you told me that 5 years ago, and the clutch scoring, we'll get more into that in the show, I'm sure. Just he's reached this level where last year I got a lot of slack because, or not slack, got a lot of slander because I said Ant's not a clutch player yet. And a lot of people were like, what in the world? What's the matter with you? And it wasn't about Ant having an instinct or not. Sometimes it's about channeling his instinct. And it feels like that maturity growth this year, he's entering the territories we all knew he was capable of, where he has to be a top 5 player. Genuinely. When you talk about, I mean, the Lukas, I think Ant's better than Luka now. I think Ant's better than the Stephs. I think he's better than the Brunsons. I think he's better than Tatum, Brown. I think he's at that top echelon. So I love what I've seen from him lately.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be some conversations, I think, towards the end of the year about, where Anthony Edwards stands in the league of superstars right now. And to your point, like, obviously Jokic's best player in the league. And after that, where does that kind of level fall for a guy like Anthony Edwards? And I agree. Like, I think he's kind of past that point where he's, above the Steph Currys, above Jalen Brunson. I'd take him over probably Jaylen Brown. And honestly, if I'm building a team, I'm taking him around Jason Tatum too. Just the way, the way that Ant coming out of college is, like, the funny part is he shot so poor efficiently, like, in college, because he was on a team where he kind of just took a bunch of contested shots and not a bunch of good looks. And that was a big concern with people, like, coming out of Georgia, is his efficiency and, like, the shooting percentages and all of that. And you look at where his shooting is now, and it just continues to get better. And, like, the fact that he's such a consistent shooter, like, he's added the mid-range package, like, downhill finisher, but just, like, the amount of threes he takes and makes, it's just really impressive stuff. And he's just becoming such an all-around superstar in the league. And if he's really engaged defensively too, I mean, he is quite an unstoppable player. So just the topic of where he is at in the league, I mean, it's a big discussion on if he's a top 5 player. And ideally this year he has been a top 5 player. He's been up there with SGA. He's been up there with Jokic, and I think, like, just talent wise this season. So yeah, I absolutely agree. It's been really fun to watch.
It's crazy because you mentioned the evolution from what he was at college. And I think when you're a number 1 pick, people ignore kind of the trajectory because it's like you're supposed to be that megastar when you're number 1, but people forget that draft. There were 3 big swings at the top. You had to pick the right one. And Ant, his growth curve is it's exponentially great. And he's legit outside of Jokic right now. And I'm not counting free throws. I'm counting pure ethical basketball. He's the most efficient 3-level scorer in the league outside of Jokic right now. That's just the truth. He's shooting 70+% at the rim. He's shooting career best from mid-range, shooting over 40% from 3 on high volume, high shot difficulty. It's just a different level. And then you also mentioned Beringer. And I mean, the kid, I've always liked him pre-draft. It felt like this is a kid that's going to work. And I think it's too early to know for sure. But all the indicators with how much he's grown, even throughout the summer, as he's gotten stronger, as he's gotten comfortable in the NBA court, it's just he looks like a rotation piece at 19. And that's super valuable because he was an upside pick. And he's already ready, it looks like, based off his first 2 games. So I think those are the 2 big winners of the weekend. But also the Rockets game, no Anthony Edwards once again. And you are giving a healthy Houston team a lot of trouble. And look, they lost late in the game. Well, they have Kevin Durant and we don't. So I'm not that mad about the game getting lost at the end. The fact that they can maintain and stay competitive against a team like that, as we've seen throughout the season, even without a top 4 player in the league, I thought that right there is also another reason to not be concerned.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Anthony Edwards, what the season he's been having is something that you can't really, be upset about. especially when you take a team like Houston, who's been really good this year, to the final wire, and ultimately, with Kevin Durant on their team and not having Anthony Edwards shot making is crucial down the stretch. And you had, I think it was a big Nas Reed game against Houston, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he had a really solid game. And other guys were stepping up too, and that just shows that like Minnesota's got such a talented team. And then when you add Anthony Edwards to the mix, like it's the question is like, how good can this team really be? And I know there's been some chatter about, the point guard position, a backup center and all that. So, talent wise, I think we're right up there again this year. It's just a matter of, some things, and, we'll dive into those things here. So,
and I think it's the perfect time to dive into it. So,
yeah.
As we mentioned at the beginning of the show, everybody, we are going to go back and forth on our 3 favorite and least favorite things about the Timberwolves as we are just over halfway through the season, 27-16 from the moment we're recording this. So let's start with the positives, though, Evan. So what is your first positive takeaway with this team 43 games in?
Yeah, my first positive, and this one's kind of been slowly creeping up, like conversation-wise recently, and that's just Rudy Gobert's impact this season. I think like at the beginning of the year, there was kind of a little bit of a slow start for him. People were, talking about him, and I saw a lot of stuff on Twitter and the media, and I'm just not agreeing with it, especially from a guy who's done so much for us on the defensive end the past few seasons. And then this past month, man, I'm seeing a bunch of Rudy Gobert's going to win his 5th Defensive Player of the Year, even from, some NBA names, in the media talking about it too. And, it's really hard to watch the media talk about Rudy Gobert because they don't really truly understand how much of a defensive impact he is. They like to just look at, his offensive side of things. He's not blocking as many shots as like a Wemby or like a certain player. But when you really get into what he does defensively, his per possession stats, his shot contesting, just overall, just being able to play great defense on star bigs in the league and be a contesting demon like in the paint. It's really fun to watch. And I've always been a Rudy Gobert fan. I think when we made that trade, I had a lot of posts about how I love the trade, and I think it's going to be one of the better trades we see in NBA history. And I know we haven't really gotten that ring yet, but back-to-back Western Conference Finals anchored by Rudy Gobert defensively, and we're looking to win something here soon. Like, so far it's worked out in the Timberwolves' favor, and I think the fan base understands it, but not everyone on the outside does. And just Rudy's just like at his age and how good of shape he's in, and just the length he brings, and again, just like the shot contesting. Like I think I forget where I saw this stat, but I think like from a shot contesting perspective, like he's easily the best in the NBA.
Yeah, he's like 50% at the rim right now, which is crazy.
At the rim, his stats are just outrageously good. He's been one of the best rebounders in the NBA this season. And like people you got to see the little things like that. And just, yes, there's some times where he makes some dumb plays. Like everyone makes dumb plays in the NBA, offensively. Maybe he commits a dumb foul, or like it happens. But like right now, he's my defensive player of the year right now. Like I think that just the impact he's had recently on this team. And we see some really good defensive performances from this team, and it's all led by him. So that's my first positive. I think Rudy Gobert is having a hell of a season right now. Has been one of the best rebounders in the NBA, been one of the best rim protectors in the NBA. And I think people are scared to kind of go at him in the paint, and that's what he's been there for. So that's my number one.
Rudy Gobert. I think the coolest thing about this team right now, and this isn't on my list of what I'm talking about, but they are, on the threshold of a top 5 offense and defense in the NBA with Rudy Gobert on the team. And defensively, when Rudy Gobert's off the court, the team is far below average, whereas when he's on the court, they're a top 3 defense in basketball. So if that doesn't speak to the impact he has on the court, I don't know what to tell people. But Rudy also, I just feel like the narrative is that he's horrible in offense and he's only a rim protector on defense. And I think this year when you're watching him play, he's getting up to the level. He is getting to the perimeter. He's attacking passing lanes for steals. He's a really high-level isolation defender this year as a center. I don't know where he stands right now, but as of like a month ago, he was the number 1 isolation defender in the league. And that's Rudy Gobert.
Yeah. Yeah, and you talk about like the switches. You talk about like the Luka switch in the playoffs where he got beat, and you see that. But his isolation defense is another point I missed. So thank you for you brought it up. Like he's like had that ability this season to really just switch out and still be like a threat on guards that are way quicker than him, and in the past have maybe just gone right by him or hit a shot over him, and he's been doing his job out there.
And
Um,
sure, he'll
and
never
also,
be.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. He'll never be a great offensive player. We all know that.
Yeah.
But what Rudy Gobert's doing this year, he's still one of the best screen setters in the league. And when you look
Yep.
at the all-around part of the game, he's never going to catch everything. He's not Randy Moss, but
No.
I think he's catching more this year. I've liked some of the connective playmaking I've seen. Leads the NBA in field goal percentage. So when you look at all the things that Rudy Gobert's done, he's even had little flashes where he'll attack a big off the dribble, which I find hilarious. So Rudy, even though he'll never be versatile, he is kind of touching ponds that people don't expect him to. So Rudy, top 5 offense, and they're slightly better with him off the court because you get Naz Reid on the court when Rudy's off the court. But Rudy hasn't been a black hole in offense, and people will try to make the narrative that he is, but I think this is as complete offensively as we've seen him in Minnesota, even if he's just averaging 11.
Yeah, I think he's had some really efficient like offensive performances, like even if it's just finishing around the rim, but also just the quote by Ant like the other week talking to the reporters, like he was like excited. He was like, Rudy's been catching the ball like this season. He's been catching the ball a lot better than he has in the past. And I think the Wolves are just even looking at him a little bit more than they have in the past, like in the paint. And I love to see that. Like I love to get Rudy Gobert involved early in games. I've seen a trend where he gets involved early in games and he gets those touches early in the games and in the paint. The Wolves really go on runs in those moments. And that's been another plus on his end too this year, just continuing to improve like his catching and finishing. And he's been, again, he's best field goal percentage. He's been efficient on it. And he's been awesome, man. And I'm a huge Rudy Gobert fan, despite all the hate he gets and all the outside noise. And I'll continue to support him for sure.
Absolutely. He's one of those players you just know. You know who knows ball based off their opinion on Rudy Gobert? Nobody's here pretending he's a perfect player. Nobody is. No. But if you don't think he is really freaking good, if you don't think he's a top 40 player in the league, I don't know what to tell you. Because you're not watching the games if you don't think that.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And that's where that, like, they look at other things despite, like, his true impact on the court. And, you got guys like Shaquille O'Neal who's always, like, talking crap about Gobert on these NBA shows. And I'm like, dude, you were one of the best centers ever. Like, do you watch what's going on right now? Like, from an impact standpoint, like, They look at the scenarios and the bias, like, oh, offense, he's terrible, like blah blah blah, and they don't look at all the impact he has. So yeah, 100%.
Shaq was never a great defender, by the way. So all-time rankings, I think Shaq's overrated, but that's a whole different conversation. Great player, but his defense, his free throw shooting, like he rivals Rudy Gobert on the free throw line this year. So I don't want to hear too much from Shaq, especially with Rudy Gobert's impact, because when watching him on an NBA court in his prime, he wouldn't get his defensive impact because he didn't bring any defensive impact. That's my Shaq little rant right there. But now to transition to my favorite thing about the team right now, I think it's the improvement in the clutch this year. And this is a team that's 11-9 in the clutch right now, which doesn't stand out to a ton of people. It's just above average. They were 11-7 before the weekend. And they play the Rockets without Anthony Edwards, and then they play the Spurs without Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid coming down from 25. So those two games aren't going to really affect my perception on this team in the clutch. They're just making better decisions. They are one of the best offenses in the clutch this year, which is a contrast from last year. And Anthony Edwards is having the most clutch regular season we've ever seen in the NBA. And I am not exaggerating when I say that. Anthony Edwards this year, 71% in the clutch, a blistering 61% from three. We just saw him drop 24 on the San Antonio Spurs. Anthony Edwards, it's kind of a combined take, but Anthony Edwards, his clutch scoring, how that's contributed to just the team's overall clutchness. There's just a massive growth this year. And when we talk about playoff basketball this year, if you feel better about the Timberwolves in the playoffs this year than last year, which I do, a big step in that direction is that they are a really good clutch team now. Anthony Edwards is the best clutch player in the league right now. And last year, that was not the case. And if that translates to the playoffs, they're probably going to win more basketball games in bigger moments than they did last year. And they improved a lot in the playoffs in the clutch last year. So I'm not saying they didn't, but the fact that they now have just a go-to guy in the clutch and Anthony Edwards, and I think the growth in the chemistry, I think the maturity growth this year, I think the clutch gene this year is at a whole other level from last year.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, and you look at last year's regular season, and I think the big statistic that stood out was the Timberwolves lost like 20 plus clutch games last year
Yep.
in the regular season. And that was like, I made a couple posts about that last year, and it was insane how we would watch these games and they would always find a way to lose these late game executions and lose these clutch games. And that really bit us in the regular season. And that's also why we weren't such a high seed last year, is because of the clutch performance of this team. Anthony Edwards, I think last year hosted up a lot of like late game shots and in off of just poorly executed things. And in this year, I feel like it's just his confidence and, him being the number one clutch player in the league this year. Like, it's just been like a flip switch this season. And I love that he's just playing with so much confidence and really just taking over these games. And like I said, like, especially going into a playoffs, like that's really important to be confident in being able to have that clutch aspect of him. Is going to be awesome to see when we get to the playoffs here. But I think, yeah, just the biggest thing with your point is you may look at like 11-8 as like an okay record, like in clutch games and okay, but from last season, it is huge for this team to have it, because again, I think it might have been like 22 like total games. I would have to pull it up from last year, but we lost like 20 plus clutch games last year.
Yep.
And it was frustrating. Like, it was frustrating to watch, like, late game rotations, late game execution, like not a lot of drops, not a lot of offense. Like, don't get me wrong, the Timberwolves still do run a lot of isolation offense at times, and at the end of the games, it is a lot of Anthony Edwards. But it's nice when the shots are falling and he's playing with this much confidence, and he has been able to take over these games, like we've seen. But and I actually have a negative that I have later on that kind of resonates with the clutch kind of aspect in the team too. So, but yeah, 100% way improvement, a lot of improvement from last year. Which, when you look at how many clutch games this team lost.
Yeah, no doubt. They were 20-26 in the clutch last year. So 26 losses in the clutch. And I would also add, I think people will look at the 11-9 record, and we shouldn't play the hypothetical game all the time in the NBA. It just gets old. There's so many things that go right, go wrong. But I would say if the team was healthier this weekend, I would not be shocked if they won both of those games in the clutch, because the difference, no disrespect to Julius Randle, when you are the number one player and you have Anthony Edwards in the clutch, makes a big difference. Randall's great as a number two in the clutch. As a number one, it's a little different. So that's why he struggled late in the game Friday, despite having 39. And then Saturday, the Spurs had some ridiculous shot making, and that foul on Wemby to Berringer, the fact they didn't call it's freaking just.
Yeah, I mean, that was clear-cut foul. Yeah.
So it's funny too, because refs this year, it's less about you miss calls sometimes. I'm not mad about that, but the way refs this year are just so defensive on their screw ups. Like, they had the audacity to give Chris Finch that technical foul on Friday for Kevin Durant grabbing Rudy Gobert's jersey, and then they follow it up in the fourth quarter against the Spurs, miss an obvious Berringer foul. And then Chris Finch lets him hear it, and then another technical. If you don't want to be so sensitive about the call, then don't be bad at your job in those moments. Genuinely, it's really frustrating, some of the calls they're missing right now.
Yeah, and I think just even watching, just not even the NBA, but even like I was watching just the NFL yesterday, and like I think just the referees and in stuff in those two main sports have it's been really downhill. I mean, there's a lot of blown calls, I think, in both sports, and especially just in the NBA, like all of the superstar ticky-tack fouls that, like SGA gets and all these players, and then you miss an actual like foul call, like when Wemby like fully bumps into Berringer on that drive, like fully moves his whole body weight, which the report came out, into Berringer, which is a foul. and then it comes out. And I just think there's a lot of that going on in the NBA. And like, and honestly, like, and that's a big topic I've been talking with friends about. Is a lot of people have been telling me like they enjoy watching just college basketball recently because the NBA refereeing it's hard to watch sometimes, especially when these refs are getting upset and giving out text, but they're not doing their jobs correctly. So as an NBA fan, it's just hard to watch sometimes. And it's definitely needs some changes.
I just get mad. It isn't always about missing calls. Like, you'll miss calls sometimes. I thought the jersey grab was
Yeah,
unacceptable. That was unacceptable. The jersey grab miss was unacceptable. They made the decision not to pull the whistle there. That wasn't I missed the call. If they missed the call, they're absolutely blind. They chose not to make that call for whatever reason. I don't know. The Spurs one, I'm a little more forgiving on because it was kind of fast in the moment under the rim. I'm not mad about that. What I'm more about is they do horribly in those scenarios, and then they are, I think, more impulsive this year when it comes to calling technicals and flagrants. I think Rudy getting suspended despite getting beat up every single game. And this is turning into my first negative topic, by the way. I just realized. So I'll just call this my first negative one.
Yeah, go for it.
Literally, those bumps and then the just like impulsive flagrants and text they call, that's what's frustrating. You miss calls sometimes, but they are missing some bad calls this year. And then they follow it up by becoming like doubling down to a bigger extent. And that's frustrating.
Yeah, I think that has been. I think that's a good negative. I mean, I honestly I wasn't really thinking about that, but I think like
Either.
I think like as a negative, I think it's a good point because like when you really like you've seen Finch get thrown out of what 2 games or something this year, or maybe just one, but
I think it was just a
got
Thunder game. And
maybe
that
just
was
the
a
one
good
game.
decision
Like,
by Finch, by the
he's
way.
gotten thrown out like of a game this year. Like a lot of technical fouls on the Timberwolves this year. Obviously, Rudy getting suspended for a game. I think there really has been a lot of like negative calls and in late game like texts and all this on the team. And I think, as a team that's trying to improve and gain games in a tight standings race, like these type of things can have a negative impact on a team. And when the refs are not doing their jobs correctly and Finch gets ejected and or we get some late game text that can cost us a game, like it's been negative. I think that's a good point, and I wasn't really thinking about that too much, but I do think it's been kind of a body language thing too with the team. Like I've seen Randall get really upset at the end of some games this year, which that's another discussion of him turning the ball over a crap ton in late games, but that's a discussion for another time. But I've seen some players get upset and all that, and truthfully, like they have every right to. I think this year's been a tough year based on like some late game calls, and it's hard when your coach gets ejected, and then you're kind of having to adjust there, and with a different coach and all that. So shout out Mike Honora though. I love Mike Honora, love that man. I think 3-0 in the games he's coached this year, so shout out him. But yeah, I think that's a good negative, and I probably wouldn't have even brought it up. So
I didn't even mean to bring it up. That wasn't one of my negatives at first. It's just,
yeah,
I think what triggers me, this team has a reputation with the refs. I think we all know that. I do think there is that side of it, and I get it on the refs' perspective, and that's something the players have to work on. On the other hand, I think some of the calls this year and the sensitivity that they have toward Minnesota, I think has gone over the line. Like the jersey grab, I think Chris Finch is allowed to say whatever he wants in that scenario, frankly, because that was an embarrassing missed call. Like that was absolutely embarrassing in that game. Like those calls that they've missed this year, it's just, I don't know what you're doing. Literally, Kevin Durant grabbed his jersey in one hand and then grabbed it with the other. Literally, like he's just stretching Rudy's jersey. How do you miss that? Like, how do you miss that? And then,
which was a clear path, by the way, if they call it that. Yeah.
And the audacity to call a technical impulsively late in the game after they screwed up again. That's more frustrating to me, more than the missed calls. It's the sensitivity and the quick just want to give a technical right after blatantly missing a call that they deserve accountability on. That's the worst part of it, right? It's like the little kid who can't hold accountability after screwing up and then just doubles down on it. I hate that. So, all right, next negative.
Yeah, my first negative ties into kind of what I was talking about, just like we were talking about earlier, just like the clutch games and late game. It's been a lot better, but one negative that kind of also goes with that, and it's me is I just think the late game execution with this team just needs to be better. I just think obviously it's different because you see Anthony Edwards have all these clutch moments this year, so you think like everything's perfect, like we're winning clutch games.
Mhm.
But there is this negative aspect to it that's still an issue is Chris Finch in his late game executions. I again like this season, there's a lot of just late game turnovers, a lot of late game isolation ball. And I don't really see like a lot of like actual drops from this team in converting in late game situations. Luckily we have had the shot clutch making from Edwards and some other players stepping up late in the games. But I would like to see, especially in the second half of the season, and going into the playoffs, just some more like coaching and more like actual execution in late game situations, instead of times where like Julius Randle will go isolation, spin to his back, not see a help side defender, lose the ball, and then give the game away or something like that scenario where we see it sometimes where Randle gets really sloppy with the ball, or Edwards gets doubled or just certain situations where the Wolves just they go right to the isolation ball and they don't have a draw. And I don't know if it's Chris Finch. Like I don't know if it's the players that don't execute for him. And that's something that I want to know about because I think Chris Finch has gotten a little more slander over this past year, especially from myself. And his rotations and his late game execution has been a reason for that. And I just think like it needs to be better, rather than just having you know, Anthony Edwards, who's been out of his mind, have to take control of a game every single time. So I think that's like one of my negatives that kind of ties into also like the clutch
Mhm.
positive. But again, I still think people gotta understand that like there's still games that the Wolves lose in the clutch because of their late game execution. And it was a problem last year. Thankfully, we've gotten better this year, but I still want to see some improvements on that end.
Yeah, I think that's a great take. I think we've gotten away with the fact that Minnesota's shot making has become so much better. And it's not only
Mhm.
from Ant. I think Randall's shot making's been pretty good at times. I think Jaden's shot making, like, there's a lot of individually talented shot makers that we're
Yeah.
witnessing right now. It's more about, right, the fabric of the team, the connectivity late in game that's been more of an up and down thing. And I totally agree. Like, this team, there's a lot of players who their instinct is reverting to isolation. And that's just an instinct in the players, including Anthony Edwards. Now, there's that balance of, okay, we need to get some motions. We need something to happen. Let's get some movement. And a lot of the time late in the game, it's five guys standing, one guy dribbling, everybody else watching. And that hasn't
Mhm.
changed. And I think, and this isn't an anti Anthony Edwards thing, you've noticed when he hasn't played, the motion's way better early in games and middle of games. Late in games, even without Anthony Edwards, it reverts to isolation. So, can we find what they had without Anthony Edwards early in games, apply that late, and then also get Anthony Edwards involved in that to just an extent? Because Ant's a 50% catch and shoot guy from 32, right? There's a lot of individually good spot up guys on the team. You have all these big athletes, and can they just get that thing going? And I think that's also, you can mention the point guard thing. I think that's partially why everybody's so reliant on a small guard on this team in the past, because typically the only person who can organize late in games is a true point guard on this squad historically. But I don't want that to be the case. I want it to be a full team fabric, kind of like the Pacers, kind of like the Heat, all these other teams. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, again, when it's on off the floor, there's some movement early in games. We've looked good at times, and then but like again, and later in games with Ants on the court, it's a lot of just that ISO ball. And you don't get me wrong, I love some hero ball Anthony Edwards at times when he's making shots. I mean, doesn't everybody, but
Yeah.
just something that I think just needs to improve, especially as we get later in the season. Just the execution on both ends of the ball, to be fair.
And
Um,
it's lost
yeah,
them some big games. It's lost
yeah,
them the Kings game
no,
early. I was critical of Edwards that game. I got a lot of
The Kings game, yeah. I mean, that's just what 9-point lead with 30 seconds left. Like the inbounds, just the execution, just offensively, and it's just I mean, that's a good example of what I'm talking about. It's just
The
like
Suns
things
game.
like that just make you want to just slap your head because it's just like it's like how do you even how is that even possible? From this team. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. What's your second positive?
Second positive is kind of a conjoined one. Just my second positive is just the growth of that draft duo, Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards, the continued improvement of it. We talked about Ant earlier, so like just making that part brief. Just again, clutchest player in the league, top 5 in the MVP this race. Like not even much to say. He's just continuing to rise as a player. His maturity, just having fun. Like he's having so much fun this season. You could just tell, and he wants it bad. And I just love that as a 24-year-old who just he knows he's been to back-to-back Western Conference Finals. He kind of was joking about it, like OKC whooped our ass last year. Like he knows he has to even take it to another level, and he has been. He's at that 30-point a game mark almost, and he's really looking to make a name for himself in the MVP race. So I just love just the way that he's been this season, and just Jaden McDaniels. I mean, early on in the season, I think there was a time where he was averaging 18 a game early on in the season. Yeah. That number's dropped down recently. And Ants has gone up, and Randall's gone up. But I think just the early impact this season from McDaniels and the aggressiveness, like we talked, I think, like in the past about when Jaden's aggressive and continues to be like aggressive. He is a good when he gets to the basket, he loves those little like fade buckets. Like his mid-range game is good when he's shooting the 3-ball well. Like he's very impactful. Obviously we know he's gonna take on a hard matchup defensively and do his thing there with his length. But I just love like his handle and his ability to get to the rim more and his aggressiveness. And I think Jaden McDaniels is such a good basketball player, and I love that he continues to be more aggressive and be like that number. Sometimes that number 3 option for the Timberwolves outside of and Randall. It's kind of a weird mix with like Nas, Donte, Jaden at times. And, there's games where it's going to be a Nas Reed game. There's games where it's going to be a Jaden McDaniels game. But just his overall play this year, especially early on as like a shot maker for this team, has been really impressive for me while continuing to, be working hard on the defensive end. So I just think that draft class is just, I mean, obviously you look at it now, and I mean, what a draft class from those two. I mean, by the Timberwolves, and having those two guys locked up, for the next 5 years is just a fun thing to look at. I think it's a continued positive for this team, especially as we keep it going into the second half of the year. So those two guys are really important, and just that's a positive that I've been seeing. I know Jaden's taking a little dip in the scoring, but his numbers scoring are still up. I'd like to see him continue to just be a confident shooter too. But I love the way he's been kind of driving and being more aggressive with the ball, and I want to see him continue to do that.
I had the exact same second positive takeaway. So this will make this part of the show pretty quickly. And I'll add this. I totally agree with everything you said. I think with Jaden in particular, he's still at 15 points per game, 51% from the field, and 42% from 3. I've seen a massive growth in his confidence as a shooter. I think you're a basketball coach, so you could tell me if you agree or not. I always thought Jaden kind of had 2 parts in his shot where he would catch it and his base would be a little inconsistent, and he would kind of like gear up and then launch. And I thought it was really easy to rush and really easy to affect his touch, affect his arc. But everything seems one motion now. It comes off quick. His balance is better. And I think that's contributed to a massive leap where Jaden is not only improved, but I think he is probably one of the 3 or so best number 4 options in the league right now.
Yeah, 100%. I think that motion has definitely changed a little bit for him. Just that one overall motion and balance. It looks a lot more confident. And I know, his shot sometimes has looked awkward, like early on in his career from 3. Like he wasn't shooting the ball necessarily that well early on. And in him shooting 42% from 3 and even over 50% from the field is really impressive stuff. Again, like his mid-range game is really consistent. Like that drive in that little mid-range shot that he has, like, is really impressive. How he can just make shots over guys. He loves that little like spin turnaround, little like 10-footer too. Like, he's got some impressive mid-range touch. And again, like that 3-point motion looks a lot more confident. I know last year, like, he couldn't hit a shot from the corner. Like, do you know how many times last year Jaden McDaniels would have like a big open three in the corner and he wouldn't make it.
Clank it.
Like, he would just clank it.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of improvement, on that rotation in that shot. And 42% from three speaks for itself. And again, there's not many guys in the league that can play great defense and that have that size and also shoot that well from the field. So I think like his impact, I think people really haven't talked a whole lot about Jaden as much as they have in the past. I think like Rudy Gobert has been a big topic. Anthony Edwards has been a big topic. But I think like Jaden is kind of getting a little underlooked from like the stats that you bring up, being at 15 points a game, which is an improvement. His shooting numbers are all improved, and him still being an impactful defender, taking on a hard matchup every night. Like he's such like a lovable kind of player that you'd want on your team. So yeah, I mean, it's an easy positive for me to say, and that's I feel like as we're talking here, I feel like it's a good number too for both of us.
And I just feel like, because there's always questions about when the second wave of Ant's career is going to happen in Minnesota, when Randall and Gobert fade out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we saw from Jaden this year, it's like this dude can get even more shots. And I'm not worried about his efficiency dipping.
Yeah.
Offense, when Minnesota needs some young players to scale up, like Jaden, Nas, Burring J maybe, these guys can do it. And I think Jaden is proven, once he gets to that age 28 season, it should be an expectation that this dude can give you Jalen Williams type numbers and give you 21 a game. I think we've always theoretically knew he was capable of that, but wondering, will he develop into that? I think we're seeing that progression where that's very possible.
Yeah, I mean, it is possible Jaden's like could be that 20-point a game sidekick. I mean, it's an interesting topic to bring up, like a few years down the line, like what happens with Randall and Gobert gone? Like, what do the Wolves really look like? I mean, those two take up a lot of cap space on the team, obviously. And then you have Nas Reed also extended too, and you've got the young Barringer and in some other young pieces like TSJ. It's interesting to see, like, really in a few years when they kind of fade off, those guys like Gobert and Randall, what Minnesota is going to look like from a roster perspective. So it is a good little hypothetical to think about. Yeah,
no doubt. Let's transition right to our next negative. So what's your next negative?
Mine's the point guard position.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting topic. I think from a talent and roster perspective, like, Minnesota's top to bottom a great talented team. Like,
yeah,
you look at this roster and like there's really like not a lot of holes. Like, great starting five. It's been that way. You've got Nas Reed, Donte DiVincenzo off the bench. You've got a TSJ who really showed his true colors in the OKC series. I know he's been banged up this year, hasn't really looked himself. He's still kind of battling injuries. You bring in Bones Highland, who's had some spark recently with this team. And then there's the talk about the center position. But truly, like, we have a backup center. There doesn't need to be a conversation about having another backup five because we have a guy who can come in and play 5 to 7 minutes in Barringer and impact the game. The biggest thing is now you look at that point guard position. Technically, like, you start Anthony Edwards and Donte DiVincenzo, like, aren't true number ones. You look at Mike Conley's old age, like, he hasn't done anything this year. Like, let's be honest. He really hasn't done much this year. He's at that age where he's kind of like slowly declining into that Joe Ingles kind of role. Like, he's a well-seasoned vet. Obviously, he can still get on the court here for a few minutes and have some impactful plays and get offense flowing. But the Wolves do not have a number one. And like you mentioned, in late games, it's Anthony Edwards handling the ball. And he is a 50% catch and shoot guy. So what happens when you bring in a number one who can also develop an offense late game, but also like be a shot maker too. And that's where the talk of like Kobe White, like a guy who's averaged 20 plus in his career, but also is a true point guard at North Carolina. Like a lot of late game execution in college from him at North Carolina, a lot of late game execution from him in Chicago. Like, could that be a guy to fit Minnesota? What does the trade look like there? Obviously we've talked about Ja Morant. Don't want anything to do with that guy. Obviously, don't want him in Minnesota. And that's just, personal preference. I don't think it's a good fit. Like from an athletic standpoint, maybe, but as a true point guard, like I don't want it. So I just think that's like been a negative too. And you look at the late game execution that we talk about, and there's no like true offense. There's no one really true like setting the tone offensively. It's hard to play my guy like Mike Conley at the end of the game because ideally he's old and not as quick and agile. Like he's not, what he used to be. He's not 28-year-old Mike Conley, who was an all-star. So I think that's like a negative. Like, could the Wolves go get a number one, like an actual number one point guard? And what does that look like? Like, could it be a guy like Kobe White who can be on the court with Anthony Edwards and maybe not like have Anthony Edwards get double teamed at the end of games and have to make a hero isolation play? Like, could it be Kobe White on a draw and have Ant, sitting in the wing or a corner at times, being ready to shoot if we have an execution? So there's just it's more of like a what if thing for me, not necessarily like a full negative, but again, there's been games where people are like, okay, we need a point guard. Like Donte DiVincenzo is not a point guard. The execution, there's no point guard. There's no one leading the offense. The Wolves have found a way to be fourth in the West without it. So then it's the conversation of like, is Boland Highland okay enough? Is Donte okay enough? Like, is Ant just being Ant handling the ball all the time okay enough? And it's hard. Like I would love a Kobe White if there's the right package for him. But I think just like not having point guard play is tough because you look at OKC and like you look at other teams. You look at a Jalen Brunson, like and it's like the Minnesota has Anthony Edwards, but he's not a true one. So that's probably my second negative, just not having like a consistent point guard. And it's shown in some late game situations. It's shown in some games where like we're big turnover heavy.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to just frame it in terms of you saw what happened against OKC last year. And what killed Minnesota against a team like Oklahoma City was they have all these rangy defenders. They can throw out ball handlers, and Mike Conley, Donte DiVincenzo, they couldn't handle it. And that really affected the pressure on Ant. The pressure on Randall as well. And I do think the internal development of the roster from Ant, Jaden, even bringing Bones in, I think it outweighs the losing of Nikhil plus the lack of ball handlers last year, but it's still a problem. And if you don't address it at the deadline, that's gutsy. That's really gutsy to say we have enough ball handlers this year. So we can go, Evan, we might have to do a different episode sometime where we can do a full episode on point guards and the importance of, the status of the roster. Is this team ready? Team not? I think the biggest thing is, does this team have enough ball handlers to really rival a team like Oklahoma City? Because that's a big matchup limitation right now. As much as Ant has improved, as much as Jaden's improved, as much as I believe Bones probably handles POA on-ball pressure better than Nikhil did, even though Nikhil took a big step this year. So it's going to be something to navigate, and I do think that's going to be a big question at the deadline. If you're trying to win a championship, if you're seriously trying to win a championship, can you afford to stand pat? Now, my second negative with the Timberwolves is the free throw shooting. The free throw shooting is a big problem this year. They're 27th in free throws this year. 4 of the last 6 games, they've shot below 60%. Rudy Gobert is shooting 51% from the free throw line right now. And I mean, Jaden struggled recently. Randall struggled recently. Even Ant has struggled recently on the free throw line. And at this point, I think we're talking clutch basketball again. Playoff basketball, there's a lot of clutch basketball, a lot of low margins. And if you're consistently on the wrong end of the free throw battle, you're going to lose games that you should win. So, and also it doesn't help that your best free throw shooters, whether it's Donte or Mike, they're not high volume free throw shooters. So I think that's going to be a big question with this team late in the season. How can they close the game on the line? Because they've lost some games on the line, even though Houston couldn't make a free throw either. Houston, you lose the game on the free throw line, and they almost lost the Spurs game the other week on the free throw line. They scare themselves a lot on the line, so that's a big problem for me.
Yeah, and to keep it short, like free throws as a coach, free throws win basketball games. Like you have a lot of situations in the game of basketball where a single free throw can win you the game. And ideally, if you're a bottom ranked free throw shooting team, like it can cost you a lot of clutch games. In the playoffs, you're gonna have to make free throws. It's an important aspect of the game. I always make my team shoot 20 free throws every practice because that's something that is important to me, and I think free throw shooting is really key. I hope those Wolves are getting in the gym because, like you mentioned, 27 free throws. Gobert struggled a lot lately. Jaden struggled. Some other guys have struggled. And again, like the high volume shooters at the line don't go to the line a lot. And I think it's an issue. And at the end of the day, yes, like free throws win games. They win clutch games. It's been a negative. There's not really much to say to it. Like it's a small kind of topic. Like make your free throws. Got to make your free throws. Got to make your free throws and got to clutch out games by doing so. And again, we saw Gobert last few games miss a crap ton of free throws, and it hurts a game like that, especially when you barely lose to a Houston team or barely lose to a San Antonio team. Free throws matter. So, especially for a playoff team, you got to be a better free throw shooting team if you're going to be a 4 seed in the West, especially going to the playoffs. So, yeah, I think it's a good one. I mean, that's kind of like a small topic for me, but I think it's really important, like especially in the game of basketball. So, I think I agree 100%.
Biggest weakness of the team right now. You're 27th in that category. That is horrid. It's awful. Yeah. And Rudy is usually, even if people want to make the jokes about how unskilled he is, he's usually around a 66% free throw shooter, and he's at 50.6. That's how bad it is right now. So it's something to navigate. But what is your final positive with the team?
Final positive. I was kind of going between two as a final positive. This one will just be like a solid. I really like just the way the team has really just fought in games this year. Like being a 4 seed in the Western Conference is, at the end of the day, it's hard to do. Like there's a lot of competition in the West. I think that the fact that we're only like 2.5 games back from Houston or Denver, I don't even know what the standings are. Denver, and then who's the other seed that I'm thinking of? Spurs. Being like 2.5 games back from those type of teams, like was still a good amount of games left. Like I think the Timberwolves are right there, and I think like the point guard play we talk about, it's like the OKC series. Do you bring in another ball handler? Because you're playing good basketball, but do you like want that matchup, have another ball handler, point guard one against a team like OKC if you see them? There's that. My number 3 though, I don't know how much you'll agree with this, and I don't know how much other people will agree with it, but I'm gonna say like I think Donte DiVincenzo's impact, and that's more of a positive this year in my end, and I want to call it out because I don't think a lot of people like when I look at Twitter and I look at what Timberwolves fans are saying about Donte DiVincenzo, it's a lot of negative. Like it's a lot of negative. Like, oh, Dante's missing so many shots. Like, oh, Donte made a crappy turnover. Like, I think Dante's in a really tough position, like right now with this team, because he's asked to kind of been playing a different role than he has been played, like on the Knicks. In his role, like I think as a positive, he has just been all over the place, like on the court. I think he is such like a high energy guy that always like gives 110% like on both ends of the court. And I just think like this year he's averaging 13 a game. Like he's averaging almost 5 rebounds a game and 4 assists. He's shooting 38% from three. Like, as a guy who shoots a lot of threes, 38% from three is not bad at all. Like, that's a good number for a high volume 3-point shooter.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think people like look at the games with him this year and they're like, oh, he shot like 2 for 10 from three and had a good amount of turnovers. But again, it's like he's been in a situation where he hasn't really gotten to play like a natural position in his. So I give him the benefit of the doubt of some high turnover games. I give him the benefit of the doubt of having some off shooting nights, but I really liked his impact so far this year. I think like he's been able to knock down shots in some big games. He's made some really good hustle plays on the defensive end. And I just think like his all around game and energy to this team has been a positive. I really love his energy, just whether it's on the bench, whether it's on the court. Like he's been a dog for this team. And I know last year wasn't a great year for him. Last year's playoffs wasn't great for him. And I really hope he can really have a good playoffs this season. But I just think he's been a positive. I think like overall, just the little things that he does for this team, the hustle plays, diving on the floor, like blocking shots, like he does a lot of those hustle plays that really energize a crowd. Yeah, I think people are kind of hating on him too much. I think he's still been able to knock down some big shots and play his game. But again, like he's not playing a natural position when he's asked to like be the one sometimes or be uncomfortable in a position where he's still making good plays. He's averaging 4 assists a game. He's pulling down 5 rebounds a game as a guard. I think he's been a positive for his team, and I'm a big Donte fan, and I really hope he continues to ball out and has a good playoff series this year.
I full-heartedly agree. I think it's the Rudy Gobert thing too, where I think a lot of the aesthetics with Donte don't stand out because I get frustrated with it too. So I'm not like separating myself from normal fans and other fans and everybody, but I will say that there are real limitations with what he does off the dribble. He can't really create off the dribble. His handle isn't very tight. He's highly streaky. He'll go 4 for 6 from 3 one game and go 1 for 9. I mean, before the end of that Spurs game where he hit those 2 threes, he was 2 for 11. And there's a lot of games like that. So I get why that's a frustrating thing for all fans. I get that. But I do agree with you that despite that, the value he brings at $11.9 million, which is somebody who can take over a game offensively, but more importantly is that he just has a fabric about him where he plays tough on the point of attack. He can rotate. He can block shots. He'll dive for the ball. He'll grab 7 rebounds as a guard if you need him to. He will have games where he's a really good connective passer, right? He does all the really good connective things. And I think the frustrating thing is he isn't a point guard, and he's playing point guard theoretically on the team. But what he is he's a very good connective off-ball player who does all the right things defensively. And I think he's become one of those players that unless you are like trading for a star and you're packaging another big contract, he's not a guy you trade for Kobe White. He's not a guy you trade for Colin Sexton. He's too valuable with what he brings. And when you get rid of that player, you're getting rid of the fabric in a lot of ways. And you need that fabric to truly contend.
Yeah, he's definitely been a streaky guy. But like we talked about, like there's going to be games where he shoots ball. There's going to be games where he doesn't shoot well on high clips. But he's been that glue guy. Like his defensive rotations are there. He's a quick player, knows how to rotate, like knows how to get into passing lanes, like effectively, disrupt. And again, like just all the little things he does, like he pushes the ball well in transition. Again, and he's not a one, and that's where that discussion comes in. Is like, do you if you get a Kobe White, what does the package look like? And that's a conversation for another day. Is you have to give up that $11 million contract, which is, like you said, is a steal of a contract for a guy like Donte DiVincenzo, who does a lot of the little things. Because ultimately, like Kobe White, you can give up Rob Dillingham, and give them a young guard back. But what's the salary that you're putting in to go get Kobe White's contract? So again, another combo for another day, but it's hard to look at it. Like, do we give up a Donte DiVincenzo who could make a crucial play in games for us, like for a point guard and addressing that position? But I think I love Donte, man. I've been rooting for him since we've got him. Like I've always been a fan of his. So I love his hunger. Like he's got a good attitude. He plays the game with a lot of passion. So, and he's on a steal of a contract. So yeah.
Real talk, man. And my final positive with this team is that they're beating young teams. They're, I believe, 18-4 against below 500 teams this year. And sometimes those 4 losses, they leave a big stain. The Hawks game, big stain. The Nets game, big stain. But we're just naming a couple examples. And the fact that they're big stains is because it's rare at this point. I think we are desensitized a couple of years in the past by how many games like that they would lose. And they've been taking care of business against bad teams. And I think at the end of the year, if they're winning 80% of their games against below 500 teams, that's going to really bode well in the standings. And it also showcases more examples. This team's growing up. This team, they're playing with more maturity against teams of all levels. We've seen Ant say, I want to drop career highs against these teams. And he's shown up against these squads. Like, we're not getting the random 12 points on 4 for 17 against the Hornets that Ant would do in his third year in the league. He's consistent, and that goes from top to bottom. Shout out to the team taking care of bad teams.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because, in the past, it's the Wolves would lose to Charlotte every time they played Charlotte, or they would lose to, the Pelicans whenever we played the Pelicans, and they wouldn't be able to take care of teams like that. And as a fan, it's super frustrating because you're like, how do we? And it was like a switch flip because we would beat these good teams and we'd play great basketball versus these good teams. And then we'd play these teams where we should go in and take care of business, and we would lose these games and play a crappy game. And that was so frustrating. So their ability to go in and take care of business and have such a good record against below 500 this year has been good. But now it's more of like hey, we got to be more consistent against, these playoff teams and get more confidence in, hey, we know we could beat anybody. Like we know we could take care of business against anybody. But we got to start doing it kind of heading into the second half of the year and as we get into the playoffs so we could be confident. But, yeah, I think this team's confident. So, like, everyone on this team's confident. Like, they know they could take care of business against anybody. So I'm excited to see how they kind of do against these above 500 teams here in the second half of the year.
What made the team fall behind a little bit in the standings was the fact they couldn't beat a good team the first 6 or 8 games. But ever since then, I think they've done a pretty good job against high-level teams. Even the losses recently against the Rockets, Spurs, I'm not mad at. And they've beaten the Spurs, they've beaten the Celtics, they've beaten the Thunder, they've beaten all the top teams in the league. They gave Denver trouble. Like, I'm not worried against these elite teams anymore. So shout out to Minnesota. I don't worry about them against bad teams the second half of the year, especially as I think all of them have their eyes on Darren Peterson and AJ DeBonsta. But now they got to take care of those good teams and build off of what they've done since Thanksgiving, frankly. So now, what's your final negative take?
Dude, real quick, when you brought up like the draft and like Darren, and I just instantly thought of like, God, if OKC gets a top 3 pick and they get like an AJ Diamonds on their team too.
They're winning games now. The Clippers are winning games, so they're pushing it out.
I'm just like, dude, Sam Presti is just like, he might be the smartest man I've ever seen. I mean, he like as a basketball like GM and in operations, it is just insane that you mentioned that. And I'm like, oh my God, OKC could get another top 5 pick, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, not good.
I don't want to think about that. I really
no thoughts on that now. Just funny that you mentioned it. Yeah, the final negative is kind of hard for me to think about it. I'm gonna be that guy. In my final negative is gonna be Chris Finch. I like Chris Finch, like I do. I think his biggest issue is like he still struggles when teams go on runs to use the timeout.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's costed Minnesota some games because of it. I also think his rotations like still have some issues when like leaving in a hot hand or leaving in a rotation that's taking care of business. Um, but ultimately, like I've seen a few games. I saw a lot of it last year. Like a lot of the timeout issues last year, a lot of the rotation decision making last year. Um, and I still see it a little bit this year.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much. But I think as a head coach, like you need to be aware of like when to use a timeout. If you're playing an OKC or a Denver, and if you see like a 8-0 run happen and you don't call a timeout and all the momentum is on their side right now, and you let that go for another 6 to 8 points, like that is a big stretch, like in basketball, of a 6-0 run timeout compared to like a 15-0 timeout. And I don't know what it is, but it really like it's something that really like makes me upset as a Wolf fan and just a basketball fan is Chris Finch doesn't know how to use timeouts. Um, it's been an issue, like
Mm-hmm.
it's been an issue for him. And I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. The Wolves are the fourth in the West. Like we're having a good season. Like we've back-to-back West Conference Finals. Like there's no like knock on him for that. I just thinking when it gets to the second half of the season and you're in these big games versus these big teams, and then when it comes down to seeing, like he has to be good. Like he has to be good with his timeouts. He has to be smart with his decision making, and ultimately, like he has to execute games better. He has to like come up with some type of action other than isolation ball. Because is there going to be a time where the Anthony Edwards clutchness just isn't going to be there in a crucial game? Like
Players have bad nights.
it could happen. Like it could be in a playoff game where Ant is like his clutchness just isn't there. And since we didn't execute, like, and that's my worry. Like it's not like a full-blown negative, but it is a negative at times. And I'm scared it could be a negative in the second half of the season if Chris Finch doesn't like execute things better on the overall just game aspect of things, like, but also like the late game execution. So I think like the usage of timeouts, the late game execution, like I still think it's a little bit of a negative, and that's like, and I'm gonna be the one to say it because I'm been a little iffy on Finch the past year. So that's gonna be my third negative. It was hard for me to really think of like a full blown third negative, because my main two were kind of my main two that I had with like the point guard position. I don't even remember what I said the first one. The point guard position, and I think the first one was what was the first one that I said? I'm already losing my mind.
We'll rewind after the show. We've had a lot of topics today.
Yeah, we'll rewind. But yeah, that's my third one.
Yeah, I think quickly on Finch, I do think for the most part I've been pretty pleased with them. I mean, the team's winning basketball games. I think the core players have developed right. I think I've even seen growth, I think, as a play caller throughout the season. I do think, though, the questions that you have about Finch going into the season have remained, whether it is, like you're talking about, like timeout management, late game calling. Sometimes, wish he was a little more bold to some rotation decisions. I think a lot of people are frustrated with some of the lack of opportunity for some talented young players. That's just depending on the person you ask. And I think those are fair questions. I think at the end of the day, though, he is awesome in terms of, one, the dude wins basketball games. And I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
But also, number two, I think he's really good at establishing an identity on a squad. And it's kind of the European coaching style, as I've said a couple times, where
Yeah.
he's kind of has that. He's tough on young players. He's really good at finding the utility players around your best player. And I think the way he likes to play basketball is more European, even though we haven't seen that come into full fruition. I do think that he still has to answer the question, is this a dude who's going to be the coach of a championship team? I don't know yet. I think he's really good. Is this Mark Jackson and Steve Kerr? I don't know. Maybe he is a championship coach. I still need to see more with the late game execution, timeout stuff, and can Beringer just answer the question on, does this team have a player development deficiency? I'm not full in on that right now with what I think Beringer is. I just think that Finch is one of those coaches who needs kind of specific players on his team. And I do think Beringer fits that mold, but I think it's going to be just something to watch.
Yeah, and it's a good point about the young player. That's also like someone didn't mention. It's like, you trade up for a guy like Dillingham, he makes some mistakes, and Finch is like quick to get upset with him, like on the young players. What I didn't like is like it took Finch so long last year to play Terrence Shannon Jr., a guy who came into the NBA like he was already 24, who was already an NBA ready wing with length, like defensive instincts, and really good downhill, really good downhill speed. And we saw that OKC game that we won when Terrence Shannon Jr. was literally like a top 3 player in that game.
Yeah.
Like but it was the thing of like, it took him so long to notice that you can play a guy like that, like during the season. And I'm happy Behringer's getting some run right now, because as young as he is, I think when Rudy Gobert's out of the game, he's a guy that can really come in and just impact the game for 5 or so minutes. With his length, with his offensive like rebounding and doing the little things that Rudy Gobert does. Dillingham's a little different because he's kind of a liability on the defensive end. He hasn't been able to make shots. Like,
he's straight bad. I'm just going to say it. He's straight
a
very bad NBA player.
He's been bad. And for Finch, I understand that aspect. But it's the players like Terrence Shannon who you took a whole year to play. And then it's like you're starting to play Behringer. I think that there is that combo, like you mentioned, of with the young players, like he gets on them and doesn't like to play them that much. Like there's the developmental aspect of it. But then there's like, okay, he's been with Jaden. They grew a lot. Like, but again, it's been like the recent like rookies and the players that he hasn't given a lot of attention to. And Jalen Clark even too. Like he's been kind of, some games he's been in, some games he's been out. So there's part of that too. And I like your point. Like, is he a championship coach? Like, can he get past the hump and out coach a team like OKC, or out coach, a coach like a team like that, where ideally that all they do is pressure with their guards, and it ate us up last year and we had no answer for it at all. Besides like game 3 when we won, or game 4 when we won, scored 140 points. I'm like, where was that game 4 and 5? So yeah, I mean, I do think Finch, like, he wins games. He wins a lot of games he's been to back-to-back Western Conference Finals. There's no like downfall in putting anything on that. But I think it's the decision making, the timeouts, like being able to really outcoach a team like OKC, like the young guys, like if they're playing good, like they need to stay in the rotation. And Dillingham's been bad. I agree with there, but it's like a Terrence Shannon when he's hot, like you got to keep playing in minutes. Behringer, like you have a backup 5, like play him, even though he's young, it doesn't matter. Like he's impacting the game. He's had 10 points and 8 rebounds against Wemby in the Spurs, like as a 19-year-old. So again, there's some stuff with it. There's some positives and negatives with Finch. And my thing is like, can he continue to outweigh the negatives and really just be a full-time positive? But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think that with our young player development conversation, I think it actually opens up my last negative. And my last negative is the lack of development from the 2024 draft class. You take Rob Dillingham 8th. You take Terrence Shannon Jr. 27th. Rob Dillingham, and we can talk about, was he developed right? Was he not? It was probably not the right team for him, because that archetype of player, especially one, and I'm saying this as respectful as possible, he was an overtime player. He was a Kentucky player, went to Kanye's high school. I am sure he had a lot of confidence in himself, right? And I think a player like that going to a team like Minnesota with a volume style game, not getting a lot of burn, I think that confidence becomes fragile, because it's a big shift from the attention a player like that would normally get as a young social media sensation. And I think that's been a bad fit. And I personally, I know people will be patient with him. It's possible post-deadline, Tim Connolly won't wave the white flag and say the kid just needs time. We have a good team. I'm very out on him fitting in Minnesota personally. and I think whiffing on number 8 is a problem. And that's just my read. I might be too early on it, but I don't think I am, frankly. And then the Terrence Shannon thing, I'm a little more generous toward because he's been injured this year, and
Yeah.
an injured player who's so reliant on his explosiveness, a guy with a foot issue, and that archetype is a problem. So I'm not fully out on Terrence Shannon Jr., and maybe he does answer a lot of the questions with the wing scoring off the bench. But for now, you lose Nikhil. He looked great in Atlanta. And a lot of the bet was your 2 picks in 2024 were going to take a big step and replace that production and then some in the rotation. It hasn't happened.
Yeah, that's a good point because we talk about Nikhil leaving, and Finch had a press conference last year when he specifically said Rob Dillingham's going to have a bigger role next year. He specifically said that himself.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at this year, and he hasn't played.
Well, it's Rob's fault too. I'll just say that.
And yes,
Rob got the opportunity ahead of Bones Highland, who's a very capable backup, and he straight up shot 34% from the field and probably worse at the rim. So there's that.
To that point, yes, the 2024 class was what we were going to rely on when Nikhil left. And happy for Nikhil. I'm so happy he's playing well in Atlanta. That guy is such a loved player here.
Mm-hmm.
Good for him. But yes, Terrence Shannon, his explosiveness, now he has a foot injury. So there's a worry there with that. And that's when Bones Highland, he's just a bigger guard. He can play better defense than Rob Dillingham. He's got more length, more size. He's still a really quick player.
More mature.
Ultimately, he can get hot real fast. He can have a game where he can knock down shots and get hot. He is a streaky player as well, but ultimately he's just a better fit in the lineup right now than Rob Dillingham. And he's shown that. And I understand that I'm out on Rob Dillingham because I was really confident in Dillingham. I wanted him to work out as a Kentucky guard, with someone that quick. And his size is just an issue right now. His ability to make shots is an issue right now, and his ability to be he's a liability on defense. And that's where the trade conversations would be Minnesota could move him at the deadline. And the deadline's coming up here. So could we see a lot more chatter here in the next 2 weeks about Dillingham on the move?
Yeah.
I do think he could be a fit somewhere else. And it's hard because I am slowly starting to see the non-fit here. Could he go to a team like Chicago and go get a lot of minutes? Or Brooklyn and go get a lot of minutes.
Yeah.
And hopefully get a role and be able to play. But right now it's not looking like it's here in Minnesota. And again, we gave a future first round pick to move up to number 8. And again, it was a miss. And it's looking like a big miss right now. So could you package them and go get a point guard? Maybe. We'll see. So yeah, we'll see, man.
That is the next. Stay tuned toward the deadline. What happens with Minnesota? What type of player they can get? I do think we're on the same page of just this is a contending team, and young point guards need a lot of time often. And I don't think Minnesota, that was the right archetype of point guard to get on this team. A Burnjay has a skill set that can blend into a good team. Does Rob Dillingham? That's the debate, because I'll just say one thing before we end the show on Rob. A big reason why he hasn't figured out as a scorer. I know we all talk about he's tried really hard to adapt his defense and his playmaking, and I think those things have gotten better. I've seen zero adaptation as a scorer at the NBA level. He's still challenging dudes. He's a foot taller than at the rim. He has a floater, doesn't use it. His jumper, I think he puts a lot of pressure on himself, and I think it's overcompensated and made him overthink his shot. So there's a lot of things that can be fixed. I'm just not sure if with the opportunities that will be at hand for him, I don't think that's in Minnesota. I think that's probably somewhere else. And it's okay if Minnesota can find a different replacement who can help out, whether it's an Ayo Dosunmu, whether it's a Scottie Pippen Jr., whether it's a Quentin Grimes, whether it's Kobe White. I mean, there's a lot of names. Rob is still an asset to some teams. He just has to go to the right team.
I will say I've always liked Kobe White. I know he's bad and battling some injuries this year, but I if he's available and there's a package for him, I'm all in on Minnesota taking a shot at Kobe White. And then it brings in that combo is Donte in the trade package.
Yeah,
Do you really
Mike
want to
Conley, or Mike Conley too, because Minnesota, they have been very vocal about, like, it's kind of a non-shaken hand agreement. It's like a non-official but handshake agreement that you don't trade him unless it's advantageous for him, which I get. But then you can also argue, look, if you're trying to win a championship, guys.
We want to. There's the argument of, hey, Mike Conley deserves a ring. We want to keep his veteran presence around the locker room, and I love Mike Conley. He's one of my favorite players ever. But if it's him for contract reasons, salary reasons, and then a guy like Dillingham and maybe like another younger player, and the Bulls are selling low on Kobe White, like, I'm sorry, Mike. Like, I'm sorry, man. We're trying to win a championship out here. Like we're in a window where we're trying to win a championship. Like, if we can keep Donte somehow too, like, yeah. I mean, there's no brainer, and it would be hurt to see, because I do like Mike and I respect the heck out of him, and he's been a great point guard and a great leader in Minnesota. But again, it all depends on what a package looks like and if that salary is included. But I guess we'll see, man. Deadline's in a few weeks, so we'll see.
The deadline's on February 5th, so we will know so much more in less than 3 weeks. Evan, this was such a fun episode. We were talking before the show, like, maybe we'll get this done in 45. Now we're at hour 22, man. We went through deep in the weeds, man. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Of course. Hopefully some exciting stuff coming, maybe some deadline rumors. So stay tuned, y'all.
Stay tuned. Make sure to follow Evan on T-Wolves Insider. If you ever want to be on the show, there's Wolves Fandom Friday, which every Friday we have a fan-oriented guest on the show, and that could be you. If you want to email me, wilder@wilderouters.com, or DM me What's on Tap NBA on Instagram and X, I'll take a look at your message, and we will get something happening. So this show, it's a community for everybody in the Timberwolves community. Thank you all so much. This is Wilder Wolves Hall of Fame Mode Fandom.